There are entries in a landlord's logbook that barely get noticed. Late rent, a broken appliance, a request for pest control. Then there are calls that never come back, doors that should be locked but aren't, and the kind of silence that drapes itself across a room like a warning. On the afternoon of October 14, 2024, the owner of a modest mobile home off FM 762 in Fort Bend County, Texas, entered a unit rented to a young couple from Colombia. The man hadn't responded to texts in days. His coworkers said he quit without notice, but the mail kept piling up and someone had to check. The air inside was wrong. Still. Heavy. The couch was untouched. The TV remote rested in place. A pair of women's shoes sat by the edge of a rug, but down the narrow hallway behind a closed bedroom door was where the quiet ended. That's where they found her. Anyi Montealegre Izquierdo, 23, was pronounced dead at the scene. The Fort Bend County Sheriff's Office arrived on site within minutes of the call. She had sustained multiple sharp force injuries to the torso. There were no signs of forced entry, and nothing appeared stolen. Her body was partially obscured by a blanket tucked hastily, almost ritualistically, as if whoever left it behind knew they wouldn't return. Her phone lay powered off on the bedside table. The charger still connected. No signs of a struggle in the living room. No defensive wounds visible on initial examination. The medical examiner would later confirm she likely didn't see the attack coming. By 4:12 p.m., the scene had been cordoned off with standard yellow crime tape. The responding detectives noted a lack of blood pooling consistent with movement after injury, meaning, statistically, the wounds were fatal nearly immediately. It suggested efficiency, not rage. A garbage bin inside the kitchen showed bleach bottles recently emptied. In the sink, a paring knife with no visible residue had been rinsed, though the handle still bore a partial latent print. It was lifted and bagged. There was one tenant unaccounted for, John Vanegas Romero, 24, listed as the co-occupant of the home. His name appeared on the lease, on the mailbox, and in previous rental correspondence. But he was not in the home, not at his job, and not reachable. A BOLO, be on the lookout, was issued within 48 hours. Preliminary interviews with neighbors yielded minimal data. No one recalled loud arguments, no police calls in recent months. The last delivery, groceries from an app, was time-stamped 3 days prior. Left untouched on the kitchen counter was a half-drunk soda, condensation long gone. What disturbed investigators wasn't just the absence of overt violence, but the surgical normalcy of the space. The bed was made, one deputy noted. She was dead in a room someone had taken the time to tidy. That detail set the tone. This wasn't a sudden explosion. This was premeditated, controlled, contained. By morning, CSU, Crime Scene Unit, returned for an expanded evidence sweep. They removed 2 phones, both powered off, from the nightstand. They took note of the HVAC intake vent, where a folded receipt from a local hardware store had been stashed, dated 2 days before the discovery, for rubber gloves and garbage bags. The report was flagged for escalation, not because the crime itself was rare, but because of the total absence of noise surrounding it. No prior domestic calls, no 911 pings, no visible bruising from before, no notes from friends, or worried texts, yet. By day 3, homicide detectives secured a warrant to search Romero's online activity. One senior investigator on the case later reflected, "What you're looking for in these situations is disruption, financial instability, angry messages, drug use, anything that signals dissent. But Romero's trail was clean, too clean, and that's the problem sometimes. A clean trail can be a cover for a controlled exit." They checked his employment records. He'd worked at a local restaurant for just under 5 months. The manager reported that Romero clocked out mid-shift the week before and never came back. "Didn't even pick up his last check," she told police. "He looked like a guy on a mission, but I didn't ask questions. People come and go." When Fort Bend deputies canvassed a nearby gas station, a partial match to Romero's license plate was captured at 2:43 a.m., heading westbound toward Needville. He hadn't been seen since. The vehicle, a 2005 silver Honda Accord, was registered under his name. There were no signs he'd taken clothes. No passport use logged at the border. The lease payment had cleared the bank a week before. Bank transactions stopped 2 days before Anyi's death. For detectives, it raised one hard question. Did Romero run, or was he planning never to be found? At 10:37 a.m., 48 hours after the body was discovered, the Fort Bend County Sheriff's Office obtained a warrant to collect and analyze all digital data associated with the missing co-tenant's devices. Romero's phone, laptop, and associated online activity were logged for full forensic imaging. The initial review revealed something atypical, a sudden and complete digital blackout starting October 12th. No calls, no texts, no logins, no financial activity. Not a single authentication pinged on any platform. In most domestic homicide investigations, perpetrators make mistakes. They panic. They call someone. They Google things they shouldn't. But Romero's trail didn't just go cold. It was deliberately silenced. His phone had been shut off and wiped of recent cache logs. His location services were disabled hours before the estimated time of death. There was no suspicious web history, no flagged search strings, and no communication outbursts. If anything, his data looked too normal, like a blank invoice that had been printed for effect. That was the first real problem. Investigators shifted focus to third-party metadata. Cell tower triangulation placed his last known signal within a 3-mile radius of the Jeski Road area, rural land with limited surveillance coverage. That matched the direction where the silver Honda Accord was last caught on a traffic camera, westbound, no passengers, lights off. While examining Romero's Google account, detectives accessed location history stored on a backup server. It confirmed 2 key locations visited in the 72 hours before Anyi's death: a hardware store 2.8 miles from their home and a self-service gas station with no attendant, both visited late at night. The items purchased, rubber gloves, industrial bleach, heavy-duty garbage bags, matched forensic findings at the scene. Receipts were found in his digital wallet, timestamped to October 11th, 10:18 p.m. Credit card records showed no purchases beyond that date. His employment records were pulled next. Romero had quit his job at a local restaurant mid-shift without explanation. Security footage from the business confirmed that on his last day, he removed his apron, placed it on the manager's desk, and walked out without saying a word. No confrontation, no incident report. A colleague later recalled he looked blank, not angry, just done. At his workplace locker, authorities found nothing but a folded piece of notebook paper. On it, a list written in Spanish, line by line: ropa, telefono, cuchillo, gasolina, clothes, phone, knife, gasoline. There was no signature, no date. The apartment's Wi-Fi router logs also raised flags. Romero's device disconnected permanently from the network at 12:43 a.m., hours before Anyi was discovered. That log, buried in the admin panel, showed he'd manually disabled automatic cloud backups. It was subtle, easy to miss. Most people don't touch those settings. Investigators began mapping his known contacts. No calls were made to friends or family in Colombia since October 10th. No outgoing messages, no job inquiries, no hotel check-ins. Even his Spotify activity ended that week. This was not a disappearance. This was disengagement. Romero's immigration paperwork was also reviewed. He had no criminal history, no outstanding warrants. His visa status was current. He and Anyi had entered the U.S. legally 6 months prior on a fiancé visa. The sponsorship had been processed under her name, though they were not formally married. Anyi's family confirmed via embassy contact that she had recently considered returning to Colombia. She had not told Romero. It was a critical tension point, not just emotionally, but legally. If she returned, he would lose his immigration anchor. No messages were found to indicate conflict. Yet her WhatsApp log showed she had reached out to a cousin days before her death, asking about ticket prices and embassy contacts. Investigators added that to motive theory. A search of Romero's emails found no evidence of flight purchases or planned travel. His passport was not taken. No border crossings were logged in his name. If he had left Texas, he did it without legal documentation. But the most disturbing anomaly came from a fragment of text recovered from a deleted note in his cloud archive. It read, "She won't understand until it's over. I'll make it clean. No blood, no panic, just done." The timestamp aligned with the same evening he visited the hardware store. One detective put it plainly: he didn't vanish because he lost control. He vanished because he never planned to stay. At 6:12 a.m. on October 15th, a license plate reader along Highway 36 logged a silver 2005 Honda Accord heading westbound. The match was partial, but the make, model, and state of registration aligned with the vehicle listed under John Romero's name. The timestamp placed the car on the road approximately 12 hours after investigators estimated Anyi Montealegre's time of death. There was no record of the vehicle returning. The Fort Bend Sheriff's Office deployed a grid search that morning. Aerial drones, K-9 units, and mounted deputies focused on a 2-mile radius extending from the camera's ping location. The land beyond FM 442 near Needville was rural, dense brush, private ranch fencing, unpaved turnoffs, and isolated barns. Low visibility, limited access, the kind of terrain where time slows down an investigation. At 10:43 a.m., the Accord was located. It was found abandoned on the shoulder of Jeski Road, a narrow strip of county blacktop with no shoulder lighting and infrequent traffic. The car was locked. No keys inside, windows intact, no visible signs of forced entry or blood evidence in the cabin. The fuel tank was just under a quarter full. Forensics ran luminol tests, negative. Floor mats were dusty, consistent with farm road debris. The driver's seat was pushed back farther than expected for Romero's height, suggesting brief occupancy and abrupt exit. In the trunk, investigators found only a single backpack. Inside were 2 changes of clothes, a travel toothbrush, and an unopened prepaid burner phone still in its packaging. No charger. The receipt, folded in half, showed a purchase time of 11:22 a.m. on October 12th at a convenience store in Richmond. The timing was significant. It preceded the digital blackout documented in Chapter 2 by several hours. There was no note, no identification, no weapon. The surrounding land offered few clues. There were light boot impressions along the gravel shoulder, diverging westward toward a barbed wire fence. CSU measured stride length and confirmed they were likely made by a male weighing between 140 to 160 pounds, consistent with Romero's build. A few hundred feet into the field, search dogs tracked the scent to a thicket near a dried-up creek bed. The trail terminated there. No tarp, no dug ground, no campfire ash, no recent tire marks. Forensic teams scanned the Accord's interior electronics. The car's internal GPS history had been wiped. However, investigators pulled the vehicle's OBD2 diagnostic log and found engine start-stop events on October 14th at 2:17 a.m. and again at 2:43 a.m., the second corresponding to the time the car was caught on traffic camera. The inconsistency came from the car's Bluetooth pairing history. It showed Romero's phone had disconnected the night of October 11th, but another device briefly paired with the system on October 13th for less than 2 minutes. The MAC address was traced to a phone model not previously associated with him or Anyi. The signal strength suggested the phone never left the front seat. Investigators made note. No matching phone was found. Detectives interviewed nearby property owners. One rancher, whose land bordered the search grid, reported seeing a man walking east along the barbed fence the morning of October 15th. He described him as thin, with dark hair, moving like he didn't want to be seen. No further detail. No direct identification. By the time the rancher made contact with police, daylight was already fading. From a procedural standpoint, the physical evidence had plateaued. Romero's whereabouts remained unknown. The vehicle was impounded and processed in its entirety. Soil samples from the undercarriage were submitted for analysis. Authorities rechecked the area surrounding the field over the next 72 hours. No new footprints, no sightings, no communications from the suspect. This wasn't a getaway with momentum. It was a disappearance stalled in motion. At a press briefing held by the sheriff's office, the spokesperson confirmed Romero was now considered a fugitive. No warrant had been executed at that stage, but a probable cause affidavit was under review. The language used was careful. Pending further findings, he remained a person of interest. Behind the scenes, a task force was authorized to prepare a wider manhunt protocol. Resources from U.S. Marshals were quietly mobilized. Romero had not crossed any official border checkpoint, but the longer the timeline extended without contact, the more likely it became that he'd taken refuge, or worse, had ended the trail by his own hand. The forensic team returned to the field near Jeski one final time before the weather turned. This time, they brought cadaver dogs. They didn't alert. Still, there was something about the symmetry of the events that troubled the lead investigator. In post-brief notes, he wrote, "He walked away from everything in a straight line. The job, the apartment, the scene, the car, no doubling back, no hiding. That kind of clarity usually doesn't mean panic, it means resolution." Within 48 hours of confirming Anyi Montealegre Izquierdo's identity, Fort Bend County detectives made formal contact with her next of kin in Colombia. The call was placed through the U.S. consulate in Bogotá. Her mother provided basic verification, including birth certificate records, immigration documents, and the name of the man she believed her daughter had been living with in Texas. She identified him as John Vanegas Romero, not as a husband, but as a longtime boyfriend with whom Anyi had maintained a complicated history. Investigators began assembling a victim profile. Anyi was born in Cali, Colombia. She was 23 years old at the time of death. She completed 1 year of university before withdrawing to accompany Romero on a visa-based relocation to the United States. The stated plan was to start over. Romero would work. Anyi would adjust her legal status and eventually pursue nursing school in Houston. That plan never materialized. Through embassy cooperation, detectives obtained access to prior email correspondence between Anyi and her family. Over the span of 4 months, her messages shifted in tone, from optimistic to vague to non-committal. Phrases like "everything is okay" were often followed by "don't worry about me" or "we're still figuring things out." Notably, her most recent email, dated 9 days before her death, read simply, "Maybe I'll come home sooner than we thought." That wasn't reported as a red flag, but it became one in hindsight. Back in Texas, a digital forensics review of Anyi's phone revealed a higher-than-average number of deleted messages. Many were system deleted beyond recovery. However, fragments extracted from cloud backups indicated she had exchanged messages with a cousin in Bogota discussing flights, embassy contacts, and housing options back home. One line recovered from metadata read, "If I book, I'll wait until he's at work. No drama." Her cousin did not respond to that message. They never saw it. Investigators examined public and private service records. There were no prior police reports, no complaints, no hospital visits. She had not seen a therapist, had no primary care appointments in the U.S., and did not have health insurance. She was not legally employed. Her immigration paperwork was in transition, tied to the fiancé visa that required cohabitation and support from Romero. That meant, effectively, she was dependent, legally, financially, logistically. The apartment lease, bank account, and utility bills were all in Romero's name. This absence of institutional footprint was typical in control-based relationships. It wasn't that she hadn't asked for help. It was that she hadn't had a system capable of registering her distress. The sheriff's office contacted Romero's former employer. One employee, who asked not to be identified publicly, recalled Romero bringing Anyi to work on several occasions. She never spoke much, they said. She sat in the back, sometimes helped clean a few things. I figured she didn't have a work permit yet. Inconsistent patterns were also found in her online behavior. Over the course of September and early October, her social media presence dropped to near zero. Her Instagram posts ceased. WhatsApp status updates disappeared. Previous contacts reported unread messages. Investigators looked closer at surveillance footage near their home. While the interior of the residence lacked cameras, one nearby gas station's parking lot camera caught a recurring pattern. Anyi frequently waited in the car while Romero pumped gas, entered stores, or spoke briefly to attendants. In each instance, she remained seated, always in the passenger seat, and never exited. Though not conclusive, the behavioral pattern, combined with her limited communications, erased digital history, and financial dependency, aligned with forensic markers of a coercive environment. The term coercive control wasn't yet part of the official case file, but one investigator included it in their internal notes. Not physical abuse in traditional sense, psychological entrapment, isolation, restriction. Victim never had a window out, not a real one. A timeline was assembled of Anyi's last 2 weeks. There were no purchases made under her name, no outgoing calls of more than 60 seconds, no known contact with friends in the area. The only attempted travel search was for a one-way flight from Houston to Cali, cleared from her browser but retrieved through recovery software. The search had been made at 2:11 a.m. on October 10th. Less than 72 hours later, she was dead. Detectives requested her full medical examination report. Preliminary notes confirm cause of death as multiple stab wounds to the torso and upper abdomen, consistent with a close-range single-wielder attack. No defensive wounds. Toxicology screening showed no drugs or alcohol in her system. There were no signs of sexual trauma. Time of death estimated between midnight and 4 a.m. on October 12th. The only external marks were bruises on her forearms, healed, not fresh. The examiner estimated they were 1 to 2 weeks old. This information, though not sufficient to confirm physical abuse, was enough to infer chronic stress. There were early signs of sleep deprivation in muscle tissue. Hair samples later confirmed elevated cortisol levels, common in victims under sustained psychological pressure. From a forensic standpoint, Anyi's profile reflected a victim whose life had been systematically reduced digitally erased, socially isolated, financially constrained. There was no single moment of escalation logged, but rather a timeline of disappearance from public life, long before her actual death. 3 days after the initial discovery, the residence on FM 762 remained under active forensic control. Crime scene unit officers returned with a narrowed focus to reconstruct the sequence of events inside the home between the last confirmed sighting of Anyi Montealegre Izquierdo and the time she was found deceased. The objective was not just to collect evidence, it was to define the timeline. Because in cases like this, time isn't just context, it's leverage. The layout was simple. One entry door, small living area, galley-style kitchen, one bathroom, one bedroom, no security system, no smart devices, no internal surveillance. CSU started from the back of the property forward, room by room. In the bedroom where Anyi's body was discovered, new luminol testing revealed faint transfer stains on the doorknob and on the lower portion of the bedroom wall near the floor, smears consistent with an attempt to steady oneself while exiting. The position of the stains contradicted the assumption that the assailant left quickly. The data pointed to someone who stayed, moved deliberately, and then cleaned selectively. Fingerprints were scarce. All common surfaces had been wiped. However, a partial ridge pattern was recovered from the backside of the closet door, likely missed in the cleanup. It was later confirmed to belong to Romero. A second team analyzed the bed frame, which had been neatly made, as noted in Chapter 1. However, closer inspection revealed the top sheet was blood-stained along the hemline, folded under to conceal it. That stain matched the victim's DNA and provided an anchor point. The assault likely began while the bed was still occupied. In the kitchen, CSU recovered the paring knife previously collected from the sink. Despite initial rinsing, blood trace testing confirmed the presence of Anyi's biological material in the serrated edge grooves. The dishwasher was empty, but chemical residue in the drain suggested bleach had been poured down deliberately, possibly an attempt to destroy trace fluids. An interesting detail emerged from the trash bin. Underneath the visible contents, technicians recovered crumpled packaging for nitrile gloves and a resealed bottle of ammonia-based cleaner. These purchases were not found in Romero's digital transaction records, indicating they had been paid for in cash. Receipts were not located. Moving to the shared hallway, a black scuff mark, barely perceptible, was documented along the baseboard. Shoe print analysis later matched it to the same pattern found near the abandoned car on Jeski Road. It was an overlooked trace, but a valuable one. It showed continuity between the scene and the escape point. In the bathroom, investigators noted condensation marks inside the mirror. Fingerprint powder revealed a partial handprint consistent with a left hand held against the glass, smudged downward. The forensic report described it as unclear in intent but recent in age. Water usage logs from the building confirmed the shower had run for 6 minutes in the early hours of October 12th, suggesting post-event cleanup. Data retrieved from the home's router logs showed one final connection from Romero's phone to the Wi-Fi at 12:41 a.m., just before the signal was shut off for good. No other devices connected after that point. Most notably, the home's thermostat showed a manual override at 1:12 a.m. The temperature had been lowered by 10 degrees. In context, the alteration served a forensic purpose, cooling the room to delay post-mortem changes. This wasn't improvisation. It was system management. The final piece of physical evidence came from the floor vent just beside the bed. Inside, tucked behind the slats, was a USB flash drive, encrypted, labeled with no visible markings. It had not been listed in Anyi's possessions. As of this chapter's conclusion, it remained in FBI custody under decryption protocol. Investigators declined public comment on its contents. Taken together, the house yielded a consistent forensic message. The scene had not been left in chaos. It had been curated. From the manual temperature adjustment to the methodical wiping of surfaces, the perpetrator had taken steps to manage how the crime would be discovered. There was no sign of panic, no sign of haste, only the quiet precision of someone who understood the value of delay. The USB flash drive recovered from the floor vent was transferred to the FBI's Houston field office for forensic decryption. Initial scans confirmed it was password protected, with metadata indicating its last modification occurred 3 days before Anyi's body was discovered. No identifying label, no backup mirror found on any of the computers seized from the apartment. This drive was standalone. After 19 hours of low-level image processing and binary extraction, the contents decrypted into two folders. The first, labeled Docs, held scans of immigration forms, visa correspondence, and personal documents, mostly in Spanish, relating to Anyi's pending adjustment of status. Nothing in those files indicated a motive or threat, but the second folder, REC, shifted the tone of the investigation. Inside were 4 video files. Each was short, less than 5 minutes, and each had been captured using a front-facing camera on what investigators identified as a low-resolution prepaid phone, consistent with the burner device found unused in Romero's backpack. The timestamp on the files placed their creation between September 24th and October 10th. In each video, Anyi appeared seated in the bedroom, speaking directly into the camera in a hushed tone. The content varied slightly, but the themes were consistent: fear of leaving, confusion about legal options, and uncertainty about how to access help without triggering immigration issues. In the final video, she stated plainly, "If something happens to me, it wasn't an accident." The videos were recorded without any indication they had been sent or shared. There was no visible coercion in the recordings, no physical threat on screen. But the implication was direct. These were not diary entries. They were digital insurance. And she had hidden them where she assumed no one would look. The discovery reframed the case timeline. What had previously appeared as psychological withdrawal was now understood to be intentional documentation. Anyi had not been passive. She had prepared quietly, aware that direct confrontation might escalate risk. The task force conducted follow-up interviews with Romero's former colleagues. One co-worker mentioned seeing him using a second phone during work breaks, a model that matched the burner in the flash drive metadata. He claimed Romero kept it turned off most of the time and never used it in public. With that information, investigators subpoenaed purchase records from the store where the burner phone was bought. Surveillance footage confirmed Romero as the buyer. The timestamp matched the receipt found in the backpack, October 11, 11:22 a.m., the day before Anyi's estimated time of death. This placed the device and the USB contents into a narrowed window, digital evidence that Romero may have discovered the videos before he left. It also raised a secondary question. If he knew they existed, why hadn't he destroyed them? There were 2 possibilities. He either never found the drive or he left it deliberately. The investigative team flagged a concern. If Romero had planned an extended disappearance, leaving behind a drive that documented fear and potential wrongdoing didn't serve his interest, unless it was part of a longer strategy or a sign of disconnect. In parallel, officers re-examined the apartment's cleaning pattern. The floor vent where the USB was hidden showed no signs of having been disturbed. Dust layering was consistent with undisturbed airflow. That aligned with the idea that Romero had not discovered it. The drive was entered into evidence under seal. Prosecutors began drafting a material support affidavit to support future charges. While the contents alone didn't confirm guilt, they established consciousness of fear, documented risk, and served as compelling pre-mortem statements. From a legal perspective, the drive mattered. From an investigative standpoint, it shifted how the case was understood. Notably, Anyi had not identified Romero by name in any of the clips. She referred to him, my partner, or he. Her language was careful. It avoided accusation, but carried weight. And for the first time in the investigation, there was a direct voice, hers. One investigator noted in a case memo, "We've been building this from the outside in. This is the first moment we hear her speak." By the start of the second week, federal agencies transitioned the case from localized homicide to interstate fugitive pursuit. The Texas Department of Public Safety escalated their alert level. Romero, still uncharged formally, was now flagged as a person of critical interest with active surveillance priority. Investigators widened the perimeter beyond Fort Bend County, focusing on transportation corridors. Initial attention went to George Bush Intercontinental and William P. Hobby airports, but neither had processed a passenger under Romero's name or aliases. ICE confirmed no record of international departure. Passport data remained inactive, but that only narrowed the options. It didn't eliminate them. Attention shifted to regional bus depots where identification requirements were minimal. Greyhound terminal logs showed no cash transactions matching Romero's profile. However, surveillance from a station in Victoria, Texas, less than 2 hours south of the vehicle recovery site, captured a lone male on October 15th at 5:42 a.m. The man wore a cap, hoodie, and mask. Facial recognition returned no match, but body dimensions were consistent. Investigators noted the subject purchased a one-way ticket to Laredo. The ticket was paid in cash. Laredo is a known exit point. Long-distance pedestrian crossings into Nuevo Laredo remain difficult to monitor. Smuggling operations exploit the gaps. Local officials were notified and Homeland Security opened a cross-reference investigation with Mexican authorities. No confirmation followed. Separately, forensic analysts pulled GPS route history from the navigation system in the Honda Accord, previously thought to be wiped. A deeper diagnostic showed residual shadow logs, confirming that on October 13th, the vehicle had briefly stopped at a gas station outside Rosenberg and again near El Campo. Both locations aligned with the projected escape route to Victoria. That movement was purposeful and fast. Romero had stayed off interstates, choosing secondary roads. He avoided toll tags, camera pings, and ATM withdrawals. No digital footprints, no phone activity. A trace-level sweep of public Wi-Fi access points failed to detect his MAC address. Investigators concluded the burner phone found in the backpack had never been activated. It was a contingency, either for contact or decoy. Detectives revisited the apartment complex where Romero and Anyi had lived. A neighbor, initially reluctant, stepped forward with new information. He stated he saw Romero carry 2 large trash bags to the complex dumpster around 1 a.m. on October 12th. The bags were disposed of before sunrise. Dumpster content had long since been collected by the time search efforts began. It was a loss, but it reinforced a timeline. Romero had exited the apartment less than an hour after the assumed time of death. Federal agents compiled a timeline from October 11th, 15. Each hour accounted for. What emerged was a structured, low-visibility retreat. The escape pattern mirrored logistical models used in tactical disappearances. Minimal cash, no calls, no vehicles tracked across borders. Still, there was no clear sign of assistance, no co-conspirators, no third-party devices had pinged in proximity to Romero's last confirmed locations, no wire transfers, no overlapping travel records. The question investigators began asking internally wasn't how he escaped. It was how long he had planned it. What stood out wasn't just the efficiency, it was the silence. On October 20th, 2024, the Fort Bend County Sheriff's Office formally issued a first-degree murder warrant for Jean Vanegas Romero. The evidence, digital, forensic, testimonial, was sufficient for indictment. Romero, however, had already vanished. The case was escalated to the U.S. Marshals Service Fugitive Task Force. Within 48 hours, Romero's identity was entered into the National Crime Information Center, NCIC, and flagged in Interpol's Red Notice system. Alerts were pushed to ports of entry, land crossings, and allied law enforcement networks in Texas and northern Mexico. No sightings followed. In Nuevo Laredo, local Mexican authorities acknowledged the alert but cited limited resources for non-domestic fugitives. Romero held dual nationality, and without a confirmed location, no extradition process could begin. Colombia, his country of origin, has no active extradition treaty covering non-convicted individuals residing abroad unless apprehended with federal cooperation. No conviction, no custody, no closure. For the investigators, the legal process stalled. For the family, there was silence. Anyi's body was held at the Harris County Medical Examiner's Office for over 3 weeks. Paperwork delays, consular authorizations, and financial limitations prolonged her repatriation. Eventually, a local Houston church raised the cost to return her remains to Cali, Colombia. She was buried in a private ceremony. No press attended. The USB containing her final videos remains archived under sealed evidence. It was never made public. The apartment where she died was released within 6 months. In 2025, Fort Bend County listed the case as open but inactive, fugitive status. Romero's name exists on international databases, but no active manhunt remains. His last known photo has not been updated since the day of his disappearance. There is no trial scheduled. There are no legal proceedings underway. What remains is a closed front door in a housing complex just outside Rosenberg, and a name in a file that never made national news. Cases like these rarely do. In the end, justice didn't knock on John Romero's door. It waited, and then it faded. Anyi Montealegre Izquierdo's story may never headline national broadcasts, but for those who listen closely, her quiet warnings and final recordings echo louder than any verdict. I've told you this story not just to recount a crime, but to remind you that fear and silence is still fear. If you're living in that silence or know someone who is, don't wait. Speak, act, document, leave proof. We can't always change the outcome, but we can change how early it starts. Now I'd love to hear from you. What part of this case stayed with you the most? Do you think our justice system is prepared to protect those caught between borders and fear? Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from, or what you would have done in Anyi's place. And if this story meant something to you, if it moved you, challenged you, or even made you uncomfortable, hit subscribe. There are more stories ahead, and your voice belongs here too.